to understand how to
I'm not being
tweeting.
Yeah, well, thanks very much for inviting me to speak to you this afternoon. I've been involved in the Anti-Capitalist Initiative since it started last April, and I mean we've certainly, I think as Liam has already mentioned, I mean I was involved in Workers' Power for many years, and we decided, a group of us, that we needed to develop a more plural political organisation on the radical left. And I do think at the moment there's quite an exciting conjuncture that we're now present at in Britain and internationally in terms of moving forward. Fundamentally, I'd say that this conjuncture that we're in does reflect some of the challenges that the post-2008 economic crisis has really put on traditional left-wing organisations, because this very much, I think, poses an if not now, then when question for the left, and organisations on the revolutionary left with vast amounts of resources like the SWP failing to be able to respond and go forward in this situation. I think it has been a factor in its political fallout over its crisis of recently. Because we really need to actually start to build revolutionary and broad left organisations that can actually become a force in the direction of events in British politics. That's the challenge that we're coming down to. And in that sense, I mean, as Kate has already talked about, the scale and just the totality of the crisis in terms of how it's hitting working class communities in Britain and internationally does create, I think, a massive objective impetus for change on the left. So I guess that would be the first factor. But secondly, if we look at how the new social movements that have arisen since 2008, Occupy and others, maybe they also have an origin in the anti-capitalist radicalisation of the late 1990s in terms of their ethos and outlook as well. I mean, these new movements are very much imbued with a strong desire for participatory forms of organisation, for direct democracy, and there's an inherent hostility to them, to traditional conceptions of very top-down bureaucratic forms of left-wing organisation. And then there's been, I think, in terms of the radicalisation since 2008, and then related to that, there's been a disjuncture between the new people coming into those movements and the ability of left-wing organisations to relate to them with a strong degree of organicity, if you like, of being like a natural point of call for activists within those movements. So I think this does force all of us on the, if you like, the traditional revolutionary left to reappraise our current conceptions of working and try to actually build organisations that are able to relate to the new movements with greater organicity. I suppose you would add into that analysis of the conjuncture as well the absence of a strong left within the social democratic parties in Western Europe, and the widespread belief that there's no alternative to capitalism is pretty stark, and it's pretty stark because the left of social democracy is no longer promoting, if you like, a left reformist alternative to capitalism on a significant and widespread scale. So I guess all of those things come together. And I mean, in terms of going forward now, I mean, Kate has already touched upon the question of the broad left unity, and I think that's hugely important. I just want to outline, though, in terms of revolutionary unity, 4 key questions for the basis, if you like, for revolutionary unity on the left in Britain. I mean, first off, I think a critique of substitutionism is really important, i.e., and I mean this is a phrase that many of you know that the young Leon Trotsky used, where he was critiquing a notion of political organisation where the party bureaucracy substitutes for the active membership, and then if you lack democracy and you built top-down organisations, there's a tendency for a single leader to eventually substitute for the membership as a whole. And I think if you look at the crisis in the Socialist Workers' Party, a critique of substitutionism is hugely important to actually understanding the contours of that political crisis, because ultimately the SWP built an organisation where 50 to 100 full-time, I don't know how many it is, but it's a lot, full-time party workers did lots of the work that you would expect in a healthy organisation, ordinary grassroots, in inverted commas, members to do. So we need to break with a conception of substitutionist, revolutionary organisation. Secondly, I think we need a Marxist account of autonomy in political organisation, and I think that's related into that. You know, do we need to break with the crude collectivism, if you like, that says the individual is nothing and the collective is everything, in favour of a conception of autonomy that's still within, if you like, a revolutionary Marxist tradition. And thirdly, we need to emphasise, I think, grassroots organisation and the critique, if you like, critique of left bureaucratism inside the working class movement. And that sounds a bit abstract, but to make it concrete, I think if you look at the vote that Jerry Hicks got in the Unite election on a very clear grassroots rank and file programme, 80,000 supporters, and it was excellent that Socialist Resistance backed his campaign. I think that kind of conception of how we develop struggle in the working class movement that's rooted in the grassroots is going to be hugely important. And very finally, and you know, Liam's already emphasised this, we need to break with the front building logic of the SWP and other groups where you only get involved in a united front campaign if you control it, or if not you destroy it. And if we can now today unite on all four of those questions, I believe, in terms of a revolutionary unity over the next 12 to 18 months. So I agree with Liam very strongly. You know, we want to be in a situation a year where the organisations we're coming from, you know, don't exist in the way that they existed before, but we're working together in a common revolutionary Marxist current.